Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast Thinking with T.
Hi everyone, my name is Tommy, as you know. Today on the podcast, I have Boluwaji Thomas as a guest on the platform. He's someone I knew from way back. We went to the same university, we're in the same level. Were we friends? I think we were friends.
Yeah.
But in more recent times, he makes a lot of contributions on Facebook around African history. He's very passionate about African history and the place of the black man in the world. At every time, every now and then, we've disagreed on some things, not in terms of the substance, but more of what direction we should take as a people, and more about how our history should be interpreted, how the history should be interpreted, or our interpretation of history, rather. So anyway, he's going to be on the platform with me today, and we'll be talking about some of these issues, are essentially around African history, our curriculum, and whatnot. I also know that Boluwaji is also an educator, and so he's not just talking about things that he thinks. He's talking more from from a very passionate point of view in seeing the next generation of Africans understand themselves, understand their place in the world, and make our continent a better place for everyone. So welcome to the platform, Boluwaji.
Yeah, good afternoon, Tommy. Nice to hear from you again.
Okay, can you just tell us a bit more about your background and why you are very interested in history?
Yes, okay. You've mentioned my name. I'm from the western part of Nigeria, and I have studied at Federal University of Technology, Akure, food science and technology to be specific. And I've been a teacher all along for almost 10 years now. And quite a while ago, I've always been thinking, I do have these inclination about Africa, especially as regard literacy, because if you look around the world, you discover that every other kind of people, when we refer to them as race, so every other continent, they have a system of writing. And I do wonder, how is that possible that only Africa will not be able to write, and African for that matter, black men? So I used to believe that okay, maybe it was quite unfortunate that we were unable to develop any system of writing. And later I stumbled on one particular professor in Kenya, Patrick Lulumba, who was always he's always passionate about African history, going around Africa and telling them that they have to do things right and so on. And then he mentioned one particular book, Bad Samaritan, on a particular platform there. So I had to download the book and I read it, and it's like it was an eye-opener for me to actually go into the history of the world economy. And by the way, I stumbled on a lot of things, and I started, going deep into African history, and I discovered that no, we were told a very big lie from the beginning. And that is, I believe that is what is reverberating now in the world, that, okay, you covered up a lot of history, and because of that, many people did, believe the wrong thing, a kind of miseducation. And that is why I took it, okay, as a point of duty that I have to dig more into this. And deeper I went, I'm going, I think I'm getting a lot of fat that are actually damning on the part of the West. That's why I'm passionate about it. And we need to tell our people the truth so that they will be able to make a better judgment as to what our future holds for them. Because if you don't do that, the education of the people will continue to go in the wrong direction, and by the way, will not be able to develop at any point in time. If you are bereft of the history of your people, then definitely you might not be able to make any contribution to the world. So I think that is why I'm passionate about it. A lot of our history is based around slavery and around colonization. And that is not true. We had history before slavery and colonization, and we are going to have history after that. We had history after that, history of independence. That should not overshadow the ancient history of Africa. So that's why I'm passionate. I'm not even passionate about the present situation. I mean the colonial era. I'm more passionate about the history before the colonial era, so that we can link before that colonial Africa, so that we can link everything together and be able to understand what really happened. And when we are able to understand what was transacted, I believe when you are able to understand what went wrong at a particular point in time, then you'll be able to make the right changes in the near future. That's why I'm passionate about it. That okay, let me talk about it. Let me read about it. Make this thing known to the public that no, we made a wrong choice at a particular point in time. Then we should not repeat that. So that's why I'm passionate about it. Thank you.
I agree with you. We must understand our history in order to navigate the future effectively. But the problem when we talk about African history many times is I understand that there's no homogeneous African history. You had different groups with their own histories, their own rivalries. I mean, you had internal colonizations that happened within the African communities themselves, various parts of the continent. You had this group that lorded it over this group. And which is what made colonization work in some instances, because those who were being oppressed readily, gathered around the colonialists in helping them defeat their supposed oppressors, the internal colonizers. So now, that going back to your point, so is it a question of that people don't know, or that people just want to forget that part of their history? I mean, if at some point in the 17th century I was quote and unquote, let's say I was an Igala person who was probably subjugated by these other group. I'm not saying that as an historical fact now. I probably will just want to, let me just forget about that part of history and just move on to, I mean, you have new city states like Nigeria, Ghana, and some of the independent countries that now exist. How do you marry all of those modern realities with the past, with the Benin Kingdom, with the Oyo Empire, with the Caliphate, with the Ashanti Kingdom and whatnot? They are all parts of single countries right now. So it becomes very problematic, if you know what I mean. How do you marry those two tendencies in a way that makes sense and advances the continent?
Okay. It was true that before even the colonial era, people were in groups and there were powerful kingdoms. And a lot of these kingdoms dominated the other kingdom, which actually allowed the colonial master to understand, they were able to understand the politics of the land and use it against African kingdom. And I think that is one of the mistakes that we made at a point. So that's why I said it is very, very necessary for us to go back to that history and study it and know that, okay, these were the mistakes that we as Africans made in the past, that we dominated some people. In fact, we sold out a lot of people through religion, indoctrination that, okay, came from Arab. For example, that was the first slavery. A lot of people are not talking about the Arab slavery. It was very, very damning slavery. That through the Sahara Desert, people were shipped out of the country, of the continent, before even the Western world came back in, through the Atlantic slave trade and started moving people out. And this also led to a lot of a kind of war in the different kingdom. Expansionism, they were trying to expand their kingdom at the detriment of other people, even in their own community. For example, there are people that speak the same dialect that were living in peace and harmony before. Immediately that thing started, caused slave trade, they started, dominating the other people and did that for 300 years. So why do we need to know this? We need to go back to that particular present to know that, okay, we committed this kind of error at a particular time, and this thing came back to us as a negative choice that we made. And because of that, we have to learn from the history. Because if you don't learn from that, we are still making the same mistake now. Some people are still dominating other people, and this makes it easier for foreigners to come in and know, okay, take over the stage, the center stage of everything. Let's look at Ashanti, for example. They were into slave trade and so many other things like that. They sold a lot of people out. These people they sold were the people that they brought to them, brought in against them, that fought against them and defeated them and destroyed the community. Because I discovered that a lot of things were written, they would just write the British soldier marched against Tototo Kingdom and destroyed it. It wasn't so. Most of the fighting, most of the battles were won by Africans fighting against Africa, especially those that were sold as slaves. They came with vengeance and they sacked many kingdoms and they were very brutal at it. For example, let's look at why they were the one. The British and the Europeans were not able, because of the prevailing weather condition, the terrain and everything like that was difficult for them. So they had to rely mostly on these people. They formed what they call West African Frontier Force. And they formed, the French formed what they call Senegalese Light Infantry. And these people were very instrumental. They destroyed Sudan. They were the one that fought all the war of French imperialism. And they also, the one on the side of the British were the one that fought all the wars in Nigeria. They defeated them, and look at them. They were sold out, especially those on the side of British, were sold out as slaves first from the northern part because of Islam. Anybody that is practicing pagan worship, according to them, were sold as slaves first to Oyo Empire. The Oyo Empire will now transport them through Dahomey or Lagos and sell them to the white people. And that was what led to some of them also, they ran towards the side and they were captured and sold as slaves. And some of them were able to make it to the, to the white, and the white also gathered all of them and turned them against the people. And they were very brutal. They were so perfect. They had the power, they have the magical power, they have everything, and they have the weapon of the West to back them, and they destroy a lot of kingdoms. So that is why we need to go back to this issue. There's no point hiding history from people.
So when you talk about going back to history, and some of the other conversations I've had with some other people, many times we talk about, we need to go back to history. I believe that, we need to understand our history and all of that, and in a way I think history is being taught in school, isn't it?
Some schools, not all.
In some schools, okay. History is being taught. Currently, Nigeria still writes, Nigerians have been responsible for writing our curriculum since 1960. We've been an independent country, let's say for 60 years now. So if at this point in our history, we are the ones responsible for writing our own curriculum, we have been responsible for that. And every now and then, so when I hear people complaining that, we are not doing this enough, Mungo Park did not discover River Niger, this, that, whose fault is that? It's your fault that you are not writing your own story properly, that you're not putting your story down as it should be written.
Okay, can I come in now?
Yeah.
All right. If you have seen my write-ups and all those things I post on Facebook, you'll see that I have a different outlook to and judgment about imperialism. Black people are not the first to be colonized, or to be enslaved in one way or the other. And I think Black people should realize that Israel went to slavery. The Jews were colonized. They were brutally, dealt with in different era, from Nebuchadnezzar to, in fact, a lot of people. They were treated with much brutality, just like the Black people. Even the Britons themselves, the British, the French, they were once colonized by the Romans.
Yeah.
And they moved away from it and became a better people. And even about that, they still write about it. that, okay, their civilization came from Greco-Roman, and they built their curriculum around that to strengthen that, okay, they were white, and they built it in such a way that, okay, they are the one that, started contributing everything about philosophy, about mathematics, and so on. So they disconnected themselves from Egypt, which was where the philosophers of Greek, the Greek philosophers learned their own philosophy before they did so. So they disconnected themselves from that and started building their curriculum around that Greco-Roman Empire. And up to today, they talk about it, they teach it. And that is why we know about them. So when they came to Africa, they also brought it to Africa. Now, the problem I have with most activists, African activists, is that we usually take blame away from ourselves and point accusing finger at the West. They are the one responsible for this. They are the one responsible. After 50 years, those people, in fact, they colonized us for less than, I think some of them less than 70 years, some 70 years, and so on like that. And after 50 years of independence, or more than that, we're still talking and pointing accusing finger at them that, okay, they are the one miseducating us. If American people are saying that, well, that's correct. If South Africa is saying that, maybe that may be correct. But what about other Africans that have no white people among them? The curriculum has been built, developed for years by the blacks. Why are they still projecting the whites did this, white did? In fact, there are some schools that you go to and see the signposts, you see the whites, and they don't have any whites in their schools.
Well, maybe it's just a mental way of attracting people to show that we're international.
Yes. So for us, I think the blame comes to us. It comes back to us that, okay, it's like we don't know who we are. And why? Because even some of our fathers don't like studying history. They disconnected themselves from history, especially after the war, to cover up the atrocity that was that was actually perpetrated during the Civil War in the case of Nigeria. So they remove it and remove it that, okay, we don't want our children to know this. I think a lot of Africans don't even know. And then they now depended solely on most of the books that were written by whites, which actually some of them were distorted, so to say.
Yeah, is it distorted or a question that someone will always write, anybody will always write from his own viewpoint, from his own cultural bias, or his own understanding of the world? I mean, if, for instance, I was seeing a documentary yesterday and they're talking about this zombie thing. The zombie thing was something that was taken out of the African culture, religious worship, the voodoo worship. So where it's more of a worship. In some of those religious worships, they worship the dead, kind of. So when they have those festivals and they, do like zombies and all. So if you check some Hollywood movies in the 1930s, if they're trying to depict zombie, whatever, they are usually blacks. So it was part of the people of Haiti took it into Haiti and then they used it to fight their war of independence from the French. That's a very long story anyway. But so that element was taken from black culture. It's now become, so when Hollywood was trying to represent it, they didn't understand where those people were coming from. So they just living dead, walking zombies, zombie apocalypse. So that's become part of Hollywood now. So which is why I'm saying that, is it a question of people deliberately, mischievously distorting history? Some say yes. Or is it just a question of people just writing what they think, without any respect for where the history was coming from?
All right. There are two schools of thoughts about that. First, some deliberately did, and some others documented the true history. And there are many books about that. There are many books with facts, and there are other ones that would deliberately, tweak the history to favor. For example, when they write that, okay, the British sacked so place, they are always silent about the contribution of the African tribe or the African machinery to their victory. And also when they destroy a particular community, they are always silent about the atrocity committed there. Maybe they committed genocide or some other things like that. But others also wrote the fact. And that is why today, a lot of people are now getting the fact from the other people that wrote the true things, true things that happened then, and they compare it with other things. And then people are now becoming, are now gaining access to this book because of what they call internet. You can now get books. You can, for example, this book, history about is it Herodotus? A lot of people are not aware of it, but today we can have it. They are no longer in the libraries. They are in the libraries around the world on net. So people are now beginning to see that. And I believe that is what is making a lot of people agitate. But there is one problem with us. If we fight from point of bitterness against the white as if colonization did not do anything good for Africa too, is another extreme. Yes, they came. Some of them try as much as possible to perpetuate this slavery of a thing or colonization of a thing, what they call imperialism, because we ourselves did not realize on time that, okay, we have to take our future into our own hand. So I believe I'm not going away from your question.
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably agree on more things than we actually disagree on, to be honest, because I think there's a middle ground somewhere. We must find friends everywhere. This idea that, oh, yeah, the white person is bad and black is good. So I really don't think, yeah, it's necessarily correct.
I believe some of them, I believe some of those whites, they were just pure in heart. They wrote what they believe.
Yeah, what they saw as happening from their own perspective. Yeah, and so it's the story now for us is not to say that, oh, you did not write it well, you did not, but okay, write your own. If it wasn't done well, why don't we then rewrite our own history? Anyway, I know that you're someone who's been in the educational sphere of things. From a teaching point of view, how do you think that we can, in terms of creating a much more Afrocentric educational system that's, that elevates the African worldview or the African culture or way of life, as against saying that, oh, everything Africa is bad, Shango is bad, but Thor is fantastic, kind of thing.
Yeah, regarding that, the problem from my own perspective as one of the teachers in classroom is that we have problem, even not only about our history, but about a lot of things. When they want to draw curriculum, they usually call professors from the university to draw them. And then those ones, they will just look for ready materials that are available. They don't do any research about it. They believe that, okay, this one is the best thing. We have to teach about the West so that we know these things. So there's nothing that I think there's no move for now to actually include everything about Africa, especially the contribution of Africa to the curriculum, and make Africa to Africans to be able to find dignity in themselves. Because when you don't find dignity in yourself, you are likely to tend towards the other. I've heard people, one of my students, I was talking one day, he said, is it not when they colonized us that we started wearing clothes? And somebody even repeated it, one of the celebrities, that when did we start wearing clothes? It's not a few years ago. But we have to, I think the only solution
but don't you see, now, sorry to cut into your thoughts. I remember I read something from you about that, but my thing with that is, yes, actually there were some communities that weren't wearing clothes in Africa. Let's be very honest. I mean, the people in Coma Hills, as far back as recently as I think 1980s or 1990s, they said weren't wearing or weren't properly So you had communities. So I think the challenge with that is in sometimes trying to maybe the way we homogenize Africa, we try to lump Africa together as one. Yes, there were some advanced cultures, but there were some others that weren't as advanced and weren't actually wearing clothes. Maybe that person belongs to that.
Can I come in?
Yeah, please do.
You know, a lot of things, happened, and people were driven from the mainland into the bush, into the big forest. I believe some of those that were not wearing clothes were those that ran away from the civilization, the civilized environment due to war, maybe the war of Sokoto Caliphate and war of the Boer against the Zulus and so on. And all of them ran away from that, or Islamization of the northern part. So they ran into the bush, and when they got there, they couldn't manufacture clothes again, and they started using leaf. When you see the pygmies of Central Africa, some of them are like that. Maybe they ran away from the civilized world of Africa, ancient civilization, due to war, and because of that, they started wearing what they call a leaf. And their children saw them there, and all along like that, they passed it along. So it's not that, okay, there are some that were more advanced than others, fine. But that does not mean that I believe there's something about it that maybe some people actually ran away from the civilized environment due to being victimization, and they ran into the bush and they were living there. See, just like Izio Dujua ran away from the north and, from the east, they call it east, and ran into towards Nigeria, which was more safe
modern day Nigeria
for him, the modern day Nigeria in the west. So I believe that was what happened to some of them, that, okay, when they ran away from this civilized world, they came back and they were unable to reproduce what they had there. They didn't come with their tools. They didn't come with some of their major were killed.
Okay. So more of a question of the culture being a dumping down of the culture where the level of intelligence sort of drops down over generations.
Over generation, yes. Because there are some things that we are practicing in our culture that were actually an offshoot of slavery and colonization that now we now call our own culture, which is not true. Well, it's not true, our own reality. It wasn't our own reality at a particular point in time. I'm still trying to find out where human sacrifice came into Nigeria, or let's say Yoruba cosmology, for example, the Yoruba traditional worship. When did human sacrifice come in? Was it the practice? There's this practice that when you commit a crime, the people will send you, into the evil forest and behead the person at the shrine of Ogun. Maybe that was what the white people saw and they called human sacrifice. Or maybe, I want to know, maybe there was people that were animalists and, people from the eastern part or people from the Arab that came in and indoctrinated the people, and then they started, doing all this. For example, I don't believe that Obatala or Shango worship themselves in the first place. So when did they start worshiping humans, for example? So I believe there are some of them that were learned, people just saw it and, they started. It's just like the Shokoto we are wearing now as Yoruba.
Yeah, but if to understand that, I think it's just normal human psychology. If you look at the Catholic Church, for instance, you have the canonization of holy men and women, where you say this pray for saints, that pray for us. Isn't that the same thing where you say, this person was a powerful person, or so maybe we can access God through this one.
Yes, definitely we can draw a kind of link between the two of them.
Because I see with some of the slaves who were taken to the Caribbean islands, Cuba, Brazil, and some of those places, they mixed a lot of their traditional way of worship with the Catholic kin of the Spanish. They have some of those religions existing today. I think Santeria, something like that. Yeah. But going back to the very question I asked, we have all of these things. There are values in our in the existing way of life, there were advanced cultures that were thriving in Africa before the Europeans came in. And
Yes.
how do we incorporate all of that knowledge, that body of knowledge, into the curriculum such that you have Nigerians, Africans in Africa growing up to understand that, yeah, maybe at some point, yeah, we had some things great, but not just on understanding that we had some things great, but how that then translates into the future of replicating that greatness. So instead of just saying, hey, yeah, we were once great, I'm not interested in we were once great. How can we be great again? Like Donald Trump will say.
Yes. All right. To that, I believe first we need to redraw the curriculum and tell Africans that, okay, about Black invention, about black great empires before, and so on. And people should not see it from the point of bitterness that, okay, their parents were this at a particular point in time. For example, there's a contention about the race of ancient Egyptians, but there's no contention about the ancient kingdom of Kush, the Lumbians. I think we have to incorporate that place into our curriculum. And there's something peculiar about the kingdom of Kush that we need to take a clue from as to what to do in order to, make Africa great again. Kingdom of Kush was not formed by a tribe. It was a kind of kingdom of various people speaking different type of languages, and they came together. They founded a kingdom. They established a kingdom, and the kingdom rose and became very powerful to the point that at a particular time it dominated Egypt and ruled Egypt itself. So when we are thinking about this, we need to look at it that, okay, we have to look at our past, number one, that not all our traditions are bad. And because of that, we have to go in and say, okay, how do we now begin and look at the future as Africa? Because when we are able to bring our dignity back, then people will start thinking that, okay, we also can achieve greatness. There was a time I wanted to teach online with my student. Now, before I came online, I saw a video that the school dropped about Black inventors. The student was saying, wow, what a great thing that they have never seen this before. And I saw that video, they talk about Louis Latima, about Washington Carver, and so on about that. And they told us about cooling van and some other things that they invented. And people were like, wow, those children at that point, I think something fell off their face, their eyes that, oh, so Black actually contributed so to this. Then we can pick on the Black
but I
Americans
think
that did
it
great
boils
things.
down to culture again. That how do we? So, for instance, the way the Americans project the power of the US is one through their music, through their culture, movies and whatnot. And I
Yes,
don't
that's
think
it.
that we are doing enough of that in terms of Nollywood. There are so many stories that can be told. There are so many games that can be developed around, I mean, gaming, online gaming, or whatever platform gaming that can be developed around African stories and narratives. That will be very. I imagine Igbo Odeninu Rumole.
Yes.
It
That's a great
was
story
the
that we read in
English
secondary school then.
adaptation of that one.
Of that.
It was the English.
You know,
Wole Soyinka wrote
uh,
a book about. He wrote the
I don't
English.
think so.
Yeah, Wole Soyinka
The,
did write something of a thousand forests. Yeah, Forest of a Thousand Demons.
okay.
So the original was
I think
Ogboju
that
Ode Ninu Igbo Irumole.
yes, I
So
know exactly.
imagine that you now translate that into a gaming experience,
Okay, let
just
me
the
just,
same way you,
can I come in?
yeah, go ahead.
You know why people are not doing that? One is that when you project African traditional worship as evil, then people will, dissociate themselves somehow away from it. Now, about Nollywood, a lot of Nollywood producers are confused people that don't even know the history of what they are, what they are projecting. For example, where they project the traditional belief, you will see herbalists doing evil. So majority of them, they interpret the past from the reality now. And the reality now was not what, went on in the past. Nollywood has done more damage than any other, even than education, than any other area of education. In fact, they have done more harm than good to the tradition of our fathers. They project us in the most ridiculous way because they themselves don't know their true history. And that is why we need to study that history and draw a line that, okay, this part is not bad, this one is not bad, this one is not bad, and begin to write about them. I talk about Kingdom of Kush. There were people in that kingdom, great Kandike, that ruled the kingdom. They were women. There were kingdoms like Timbuktu. I don't think anybody is writing about that. And even the Oduduwa, they
people
wrote
know
about
them more of in intellectual circles, really. It's people like you read all Timbuktu, and a lot of these Black Americans refer to it, when they want to talk about their own, blackness.
Origin, right? Zenigambia. Yeah. Okay, let me just chip in another thing. And Nollywood again has been taken over by quacks. When you look at the 90s, when Nollywood, started picking up, you discover that the professionals were the one writing the movies then, and they did a lot of movies centered around the good of Black nation. Then from there, when the quacks started taking over, they started entering into what is called demonic part of this. And now, everything about Africa now, from the Nollywood perspective, is evil. So they project the evil side. Ritual killing, this and that, every day.
But those things existed
before. We were not even spending money before. So how do you do money ritual?
But people believed in offering sacrifice to attract goodness or the blessings of the gods. So it wasn't money ritual in that sense, but they did rituals to maybe to get good harvests, to get children, to get success if they were embarking on journeys and things like that.
It's the same thing like praying.
Yeah, but you still find so my own, when it comes to the African religion, my own submission or my own conclusion from my own personal study anyway, and nobody has probably presented a much more contrary argument to me or superior argument to me in terms to sway me, so to speak, is that yes, there were certain elements in its purest form. There was nothing inherently wrong with it. However, I think that it's limiting, and it's limiting in terms of what it could achieve. When it becomes a foundation upon which society is built. For instance, our culture, especially when you talk about the Yoruba culture now, because again, culture differs across different communities. Now, within the Yorubas, for instance, you have this belief in hierarchies, which I feel is very, very, very limiting in the way that it's practiced. Now, hierarchies will always exist in every society. The question is, on what basis is your hierarchy built on? Is it a question of ours is just on, I'm older than you. So it's not hierarchy built on competence. If you say that, the most competent person must lead, then that gives, society is formed in a different way, in which case society can be built on merit and, on achievement. But it's just a question of, you are older, therefore you must be, even if you have no clue of what's going on, and then that person leads everybody into the ditch. So it's very limiting in some, and that's just one way. There are so many other ways in which the way it sees the world, I think that, yeah, it's very limiting. There are some good parts of it, yeah, but it's very, very limiting. And that's why, for me, I'm just like, okay, yeah, let's understand it for intellectual purposes. But I probably wouldn't go back to wanting to, wanting
Sure, I'm
to,
not an I'm not
to,
an advocate of that either too, because there even there's corruption of that religion itself,
yeah, and it's very
traditional.
difficult to
So it's very difficult to trace
purify
back the
it.
ancient times. So
Yeah, because
it's a thing that we should just.
there's no written, we don't have any Bible to see. Okay, for instance, for Christianity now, you can say, okay, let's go back to the doctrines of Jesus, to the doctrines of Paul, and say, Mr. Man, you are wrong. This is not correct. And that's why the Reformation happened, because people went back to the scriptures and said, no, this is not wrong. This is not wrong. And then you had the European Reformation that happened in the 1500s. But how do you reform something that where you don't even understand what the original or pure form is?
All right. See. Let me just make a kind of contribution there. My grandfather happened to be one of the traditionalists, though also a Catholic. But
Yeah.
his own practice was a bit different from what I see today, really. I've not seen him using any of those things to actually, cause trouble for anybody, into the point that he even prevented his own children from, he didn't pass the knowledge to his own children because he believed that they were too hot-tempered. And in those days, they don't transfer power to those who are hot-tempered. About writing, some of them were written down, but today they have been destroyed.
They
have been destroyed. Some of them are. Let me tell you something about Ifa. A majority of Ifa listing today is fraud, because what they call the Opele and the Okwe Ifa, they were sold out to the whites. So a lot of them are not in Nigeria again. So people are just saying that they are worshiping Ifa, and so they don't even know. When you see the interpretation of Ifa in Caribbean and interpretation of Ifa in Nigeria today, they are different. A lot of people are confused. But people that went away from there and took it to the Caribbean, they knew the original version. And now.
But they don't even speak the
Though
language.
some of them also, maybe some of them now corrupt it over there too. But I'm not an advocate that we should go back into that. Let us know some of them in the perspective of knowing our history, so that we don't condemn everybody to what? That they are going to hell. And because of that, we abandon everything. We just know it for what? For knowing sake that, okay, we have good knowledge of these things, and then we can begin to project ourselves that, okay, there was a kind of development at a particular time. They will say that Africans don't have written history. Timbuktu University predated, any university in Europe.
But like I always say, like I said to you, then with that one, for instance, it's a question of you. Yes, they predate. Yeah, you had that, but it was just one part of Africa. So it doesn't speak for the entire continent, because unfortunately we didn't have. Yeah, I know about Benin Kingdom. I know about some of those advanced
Ashanti Kingdom too.
these things that we had, but you didn't have any sort of advancement or any civilization that more or less conquered the entire space, such that you had that uniformity across, like you have in Europe or in Asia. I mean, when Genghis Khan conquered Asia, he probably conquered the whole of Japan, blah blah blah, China, modern China, and all of that place. You didn't have that in Africa. So yeah, you had these civilizations, but they were all limited to one small region in the scope of things. I mean, you had the Mali Empire, you had Oyos, you had the Benin, but they are limited.
For me,
they didn't transfer that. They didn't transmit that civilization to all the crannies, and like the Romans did, for instance.
Okay, let me just something. I think the only limiting factor there is that they didn't transmit literacy to the populace. That's to the masses.
Yeah.
These scribes were the elite class. Even in Egypt, the same thing. The poor masses were not, incorporated into, they were not taught. Nearly all of us now can read and write, but it wasn't so in that thing. That was
Yeah.
the limiting
Anyway, in
factor.
that time,
But
that was
this civilization went round. That's what I'm talking about in history now, that there were some of these history, they were actually distorted. I begin to find that there was trading between them, there was transfer of information and knowledge, and all these things. Let me tell you what happened. They used to keep most of these writings in the palace of the king. And what happened in Ashanti Kingdom? It was burned down. What happened in 1895? It was Oyo Empire. The palace was burnt down. What happened in Benin Kingdom? Benin Kingdom, the old thing that they took to the British, what's it called now? Those matters were arranged to tell you about the history. And apart from that, they didn't tell us about other things they found. They burnt the whole kingdom down, including the palace of the king. Those the palaces they burnt had what they call books there that had their history and some of their writings. They were burnt down to cover up what they call scramble for Africa, so that they project in such a way that Africa is what? Less made up of inferior people, less civilized than others. So because of that, they had to justify slavery, number one. They had to justify what they call colonization too. And that was why also they had to disconnect Africa, the black men, from Egypt. But they didn't disconnect black men from Kingdom of Kush. So I think we need to make a clarification that the limitation and our own undoing, one of the things I call the mistake of my father, is that they didn't transfer knowledge to the people. They only confined it to limited people. And those people that they confined it to were the first target. They killed all of them and destroyed them when they entered there, because they were the ones selling the slaves. So when the slave came back in the form of the first, the group under the European, they came back and destroyed everybody. They killed their what? They killed a lot of people there. So because of that, I think that is the limitation we are talking about. Others, or for example, they found a lot of artwork in the war, or was the link between Ife and Benin. So there were this. Some of them, I believe, some of them were buried. In 1938, that was when they found what they call the Ife head now. If not by chance, we would not even know anything about civilization in Ife. So I think that is the only limitation. And like I was saying, we need to study this thing. We need to know that, okay, the Europe did not bring clothes to us. We were already wearing clothes, and they were selling clothes to other people. And we should also know that Egyptian and the Kingdom of Kush people were trading the Punt, what they call the Libya of today, Carthage and all. They were trading with the Western Africa. We should not be looking at they were only going towards the Arabian. No, they were also coming to the southern part. The Bantu people were going around. So it wasn't, we should just not localize and think that it was a localized what? Civilization. No, they were trading. The old Asian people were trading. They had a forest. Let me draw your attention to what, the visit of this queen to Solomon. It was even written in the Bible. Yes, the Queen of Sheba, which happened to be the queen of Kingdom of Kush at a particular time. Let me tell you about that person as written in the Bible. They said he brought gold and some kind of things, including, wood that have never been seen in the whole of the, entire history of Israel. Nobody has ever seen it, even in the Arabian Peninsula or anything before. Where did they get it? They got it from the forest deep into the forest of Africa. And a particular thing also, there was a particular time that the Egyptian army went with people from Ethiopia. They used to call them Ethiopia. And they recorded something called Sukkot. Where did they get them? Nobody knows their history, and they went with the Egyptian army at that particular time. So we should not think that this civilization was actually localized to a particular place. Let me tell you about what they call this Oromiyan scale that is in Ife. Carbon dating reveal that it was there centuries before Oduduwa came, or Oromiyan came or started ruling. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Egyptian history, there was one particular emperor, I think is this Soterosis, or I don't know the name, I can't call it, that went around the world and was conquering different type of people. And anywhere he conquers people, he will install what? He will make a monument there of steel and put it there, conquered by so. I don't know. I still want to go and see that of Romeo and see maybe he was there at a particular time and conquered the place and erected that thing. So we need to know all these kind of things that no, it wasn't localized. It wasn't that the Egyptians were so dull and they were only looking at the Arabian Peninsula and the Mediterranean Sea and were not looking at the other hand, which was thick forest, blessed with animal, blessed with what? Gold and everything. We should not think like that. The civilization of ancient Africa, they were trading. And that is the link that people, in fact, this Sheikh Anta Diop was able to actually identify those that no. It wasn't a localized one.
Yeah, there were some civilizations that existed even then. But I think at some point, the thinking or the thought had stagnated.
Yes.
In my own mind, if you pick a modern day African, taken back to apart from maybe the clothes and the fancy dress he's wearing, his thinking is essentially not very different from what you'll find in the 15th century. That's my thought anyway. But Achebe said, I do not believe that Black people should invent a great fictitious past in order to justify their human existence and dignity today. And what that says is, again, boils down to the point that we're making, that yes, you had some, but across board, when you look at the entire continent, even back then, there was not so much of what you call advancement even then. Yeah, you had these kingdoms that thrived. I know that, white supremacists try to downplay the contribution of Africans. Take, for instance, Haiti. Haiti was the first country to abolish slavery. They fought a revolutionary war. They defeated France. They defeated Britain. But today, nobody talks about it in terms of, them having done anything significant. It's just always painted as, this bunch of black slaves rioting. But actually they fought a war and they won, so that's significant. I mean, so you have those things there. I definitely acknowledge them that, there's white supremacy as an ideology of some countries, in which case they maybe not anymore now, but far back then, they deliberately tried to oppress and impoverish the black continent or black countries, as it were. But again, I think sometimes are we not overestimating our contributions in an attempt to reclaim our place? Are we not overestimating the things that we did in the past? That's my worry.
Okay, it's also my worry too, and I've seen a lot of. I joined a kind of Pan-African group, and I saw a lot of things over exaggerated history, and it bothers me a lot. I said, no, these people don't even know what they are saying. In truth, between 1600 and 19th century, African kingdom become, paralyzed, in that there were people rising up against, looking for way to trade with the West, and that caused what they call a kind of internal civil war among them, internal conflicts. And that time, the development of Africa became stagnated. I read about Kingdom of Benin was more advanced than Britain, that's England, in 1600. But when Benin Kingdom made contact with the Portuguese, between that time, a lot of conflict started. And they couldn't develop, they couldn't expand, they couldn't go further. So I agree with you that at a particular point in time, our thinking was, stagnated in one way or the other, because people were more, concerned with, who is going to be the merchant, who is going to be the person that is, trading with the white people, who is going to be, and they did that for 300 years. And the 300 years made them to go back to what? Remain stagnant. In fact, they now became totally paralyzed. And when they stopped slavery, the economy went blank at a particular time. So we cannot say, regarding what Ashebe said, it's not about fictitious history. The histories that we are talking about are histories that were written even by some of them by the whites themselves. Some of them by... Now, let me tell you those that brought in how white supremacy came in. People that visited Africa before 1900, they wrote positive things. Even Adam Smith wrote in 1700 that African is more organized and more populated than America. And the ancient Greek philosopher and so on that came to Africa, they wrote good things about Africa. They didn't deal with what they call race, as it were. And then the Romans too, when they came to Egypt and so on like that, they wrote things down concerning these people. See, today they are talking about the race of Egyptian and they say they are not black. No, they were black.
I think most any serious historian will say that they were black people,
yes, they were black.
Egyptians were black.
And at the time, they now became mixed. And even to today, the southern part, which they call South now, but the Egyptians call the Upper Egypt, are still black. So it's a black civilization. The Romans did not deny it. The Greek did not deny that. What happened? Why the idea of white supremacy came in was in 1900 when they now started looking at it. Okay, we want to colonize these people. What do we say to our people back there to justify it? And some of them now had to rewrite history. Some of these historians, they put what they call spanner in the wheel and now say, okay, the Egyptian cannot be these black people. Because the black people who now became stagnated due to what they call Islamization and other things like trade, conflicts within themselves. At the time of colonization, when they were destroying Kingdom of Benin and so on, the West were fighting for like 16 years. That's the Yorubas. Internal distinct. They were fighting. Ibadan wanted to be selling slave, or you wanted to be selling slave, and so on. And people were revolting against them for years. So I wouldn't say that I love Shino Achebe, but some of these things were not fictitious. It's just like saying that the claim that Columbus did not, was not the first to, to discover America is fictitious. It's not fictitious.
It's not fictitious. I think that's a fact of history. There are so many people that have shown that, the Chinese got there. There are some that the Africans, black people who have sailed there, we don't know. I mean, I saw some documentary on YouTube where they mentioned some of those things, but I don't know.
I've downloaded his own journal to see if he actually mentioned it, because they said he mentioned it even in his own journal. So a lot of these things I believe we have to find a what they call a balance between going off track and making fictitious claim, and then abandoning the ancient practice altogether. Because if you don't, and what I want Africans to do first is that, okay, Egypt is like almost lost to the whites. They are the ones doing all the excavation and everything. But Herodotus, Strabo, and some other people mentioned them that they were blacks.
Yeah,
the only powerful empire that, you know, in the I think 2000 BC, that the white could not lay claim to is the kingdom of Kush. Why not begin from there and study that place? And so, okay, if we could discover this thing and do this thing at a particular time in history when even Europe was not developed, why can't we do it now? And I believe a lot of African leaders will open up and say, no, we have to develop Africa, because presently, a lot of Africans have this, what they call colonialism as a syndrome. Imperialism is still part of them. They cannot feel, you know, worthy, and they can't feel great until they go out there and, you know, show that they are in England, they have traveled to London, they have traveled to US, they come back with the picture and show the people. And even when they want to make a funeral arrangement now or anything, they write so person in England, so person in this. So I think when they know who they were before a period of 300 years, when they made the mistake of selling their own people in the first place, which the Chinese did not do and other people did not do. Other people were conquered, and before they were taken as slaves, we sold our own people. So the black Americans should even stop criticizing the white as the one that brought them to Europe. No, they were available.
Yeah, but I think it's again, I think that's another thing where when we're trying to look at history simply on the basis of color and all that, yeah, they were available, yeah, but yeah, slavery existed in Africa, no doubt. But I think
even before the white came.
Yeah, before the white came,
yes.
It existed. But yeah. I was reading a story of one of those who were captured. I think one of the last set of people to be captured. The guy was sold, one of the servants of the Dahomey King. The Dahomey King gave him to the slave owner, the slave merchant, as a gift. But he was amongst those who captured the people who were sold alongside him, you know, and then he himself and one of the slaves, they were never on talking terms. I can't remember I think if you check this guy, Cujo Lewis, Cudjo Cujo, he was amongst the last set of slaves to be shipped to the American continent before the Americans stopped bringing in slaves and abolished slavery altogether. So, you know, it's a bit complex. It's a lot of complications. You had people who sold other people, and then they themselves then ended up being captured and sold.
Yes.
So it was a dog eats dog kind of situation. I think I'll probably need to end here now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Thinking with T. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever platform you're listening on now, so you don't miss any of the exciting episodes coming up. Also, I'd like to hear your views as well, so do feel free to send me your voice notes or connect with me on Twitter. See you on the next episode. Bye.